The darkness of space suddenly broke as the EU's Nightborne dropped out of hyperspace like a ghost appearing from thin air. The massive warship's black hull was covered in experimental stealth technology that made it nearly invisible against the star-filled void. Captain Kim Dae-ho stood on the bridge, his dark eyes scanning the intelligence reports that glowed on his command screen. The news was bad, very bad. 3 human colonies had simply disappeared over the past month. Not destroyed. In battle, not evacuated, just gone. The only proof they ever existed were automated distress signals that kept broadcasting into empty space like voices crying out from the grave. New Eden, Terra Vista, and Harmony Station, all 3 had been thriving communities with over 50,000 people each. Now they were silent. The Nightborne was humanity's answer to the growing threats in deep space. Unlike the old exploration ships that carried scientists and diplomats, this was a pure warship. Every inch of its hull was designed for one purpose: to fight and win battles far from Earth. The experimental weapons had never been tested in real combat, but the crew knew they might be humanity's last hope if things went wrong out here. Lieutenant Park So-min sat at her sensor station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she analyzed the readings from the colony worlds. What she found made her stomach turn cold. Massive structures orbited each planet, structures that didn't match anything in human databases. They were huge, easily the size of small moons, and they pulsed with energy that seemed to come from the planets themselves. Captain Park called out, her voice carefully controlled despite the fear she felt inside. These readings are completely off the charts. Whatever those things are, they're not natural. The energy signatures were unlike anything human science had ever recorded. They seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was almost alive, almost breathing. The bridge crew gathered around the main display screen as Park transferred her readings. The alien structures looked like massive crystalline growths that had somehow learned to float in space. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like deadly flowers blooming in the void. But what made everyone's blood run cold was what the sensors showed underneath them. The planets were dying. Each world that had once supported human life was now being drained of its energy. The alien constructs were feeding on the planetary cores, sucking out the life force that kept the world stable. It was like watching cosmic vampires slowly killing their victims. Sir Park continued, her voice getting quieter as she studied the data. I'm detecting massive power transfers from the planetary surfaces to those alien structures. It's like they're using the planets as batteries. The implications were terrifying. If these aliens could drain entire worlds, what would stop them from doing the same to Earth? Captain Kim felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. The Nightborne had been sent to investigate and report back, but now he realized they might be the only thing standing between these mysterious aliens and the complete destruction of human civilization. The war had already begun, and humanity didn't even know it yet. The communications array on the Nightborne suddenly crackled to life as Chief Communications Officer Lee Jae-soon picked up alien transmissions. His years of training in xenolinguistics had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to hear. The alien language was unlike anything in human records, full of crystalline tones that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull itself. Lee worked frantically at his console, running the alien speech through every translation program the ship carried. The universal translator struggled with the strange frequencies, but slowly, horrifyingly, the meaning became clear. The aliens called themselves the Vorthok, and they were discussing humans the way farmers might discuss cattle.
Captain Lee
called out, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands shook as he turned to face Kim Dae-ho. Sir, they're not treating us like an intelligent species. They're calling us soft flesh and talking about harvesting quotas for this sector. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Every crew member understood the implications. Immediately. This wasn't first contact with a new alien civilization that might become allies or trading partners. This was contact with predators who saw humans as nothing. More than resources to be collected and processed, Lee continued translating the intercepted communications, his face growing paler with each transmission. The Vorthok were discussing the 3 missing colonies in purely industrial terms. They talked about extraction rates, processing efficiency, and storage capacity. The 50,000 humans who had lived on those worlds weren't people to them. They were units of biological material to be harvested. Following standard military protocol, Lee opened a communication channel and began broadcasting humanity's first contact message. It was the same message Earth had prepared for this moment, a peaceful greeting that introduced humans as an intelligent species seeking friendship and cooperation with other civilizations. The message included basic information about human culture, technology, and the desire for mutual understanding. The Vorthok response came within minutes. It destroyed any hope for peaceful resolution. Instead of words, they transmitted live video footage directly to the Nightborne's main screen. The crew watched in horror as the aliens showed them exactly what had happened to the missing colonists. The images were beyond anything the human mind was prepared to process. Vorthok had built massive biorefineries on each colony world, industrial facilities designed to process living beings with cold efficiency. Humans were being sorted, cataloged, and fed into machines that broke them down into component parts. The aliens weren't just killing people, they were farming them. Captain Kim watched the footage with growing rage. These weren't random attacks or territorial disputes. The Vorthok had planned this systematic extermination with the same careful attention they might give to any industrial process. They had studied human settlements, calculated optimal harvesting methods, and built the infrastructure needed to process entire populations. The worst part was the complete lack of emotion. In the alien communications, the Vorthok discussed the screaming humans with the same detached interest they might show for any other manufacturing process. They weren't cruel or sadistic. They were simply efficient. To them, humans were raw materials, and they were very good at their job. As the transmissions continued, Lee realized the terrible truth. The Vorthok weren't just targeting the 3 missing colonies. They were planning to harvest every human settlement in this sector of space, working their way systematically toward Earth itself. Humanity had just learned it was prey, and the hunt had already begun. The Nightborne stealth systems had kept them hidden in the void for hours. But the Vorthok were more advanced than anyone had imagined. Warning lights suddenly flashed across the bridge as sensor alarms began screaming. The aliens had found them despite technology that should have made them invisible to any known detection method. Commander Choi Minho hunched over his tactical display, his experienced eyes quickly counting the red dots that appeared on the screen. Each represented a Vorthok warship, and there were far too many of them. "Captain, I'm reading 57 hostile contacts," he reported, his voice steady despite the impossible odds. "They're moving into attack formation around our position." The alien ultimatum came through the communication system with crystal-clear precision. There was no negotiation, no diplomatic language, just a simple choice delivered in perfect human speech. The Vorthok had clearly been studying humanity for longer than anyone realized. They knew human languages, human psychology, and exactly how to make their message understood. "Surrender your vessel for immediate processing, or be destroyed where you drift," the alien voice announced with mechanical precision. It was the same tone someone might use to offer a choice between 2 different meal options. The casual nature of the threat made it even more terrifying. Choi studied the alien fleet through his tactical sensors. What he saw defied everything he knew about spacecraft design. Vorthok ships didn't look like they had been built in shipyards or assembled from manufactured parts. Instead, they appeared to be living creatures, massive crystalline beings that had somehow learned to survive in the vacuum of space. "Sir, these ships are unlike anything in our databases," Choi reported, his voice filled with professional amazement despite the danger. "They're not constructed, they're grown. Yet the hull surfaces are actually moving like they're breathing or something." The tactical display showed the alien vessels slowly shifting and changing shape as they moved into position. The Vorthok formation was perfect. A textbook example of how to surround and capture a single enemy vessel. They moved with the confidence of predators who had done this many times before. There was no urgency in their movements, no sense that they considered the Nightborne a real threat. They were simply following a routine that had worked perfectly on dozens of other human ships. Captain Kim stood in the center of the bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed his single ship surrounded by an entire alien fleet. The smart military decision would be to retreat immediately, to run back to Earth with the intelligence. They had gathered and let the admirals decide how to respond. But Kim knew that running meant abandoning any survivors who might still be alive on the colony worlds. "All hands battle stations," Kim announced over the ship's intercom system. His voice carried throughout every corridor and compartment of the Nightborne. "We're not running from these butchers. They want to treat humans like livestock, but today, they're going to learn what happens when prey fights back." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the ship's experimental weapons for combat. The quantum torpedoes had only been tested on practice targets, and the phase cannons were so new that the technical manuals were still being written. But Kim refused to let fear of the unknown stop him from doing what needed to be done. The Vorthok had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had studied human settlements and defenseless colony ships, but they had never faced a human warship designed specifically for combat. They're about to learn the difference between hunting sheep and fighting wolves. The moment Captain Kim gave the order to fire, the Nightborne transformed from a silent ghost into a deadly predator. The first quantum torpedo streaked through space like a bolt of blue lightning, striking the nearest Vorthok ship dead center. What happened next shocked everyone on the bridge, including the crew who had helped design the weapons. The crystalline hull of the alien vessel didn't just crack or break, it shattered completely. The quantum torpedo's energy field disrupted, the molecular bonds holding the organic structure together, causing the entire ship to collapse like a house of cards. Brilliant fragments of crystals scattered into space, each piece glowing with residual energy before fading into darkness. "Hit!" Commander Choi shouted, his voice filled with amazement. "The target is completely destroyed." The tactical display showed the first Vorthok ship simply disappearing from the sensor screen, leaving only debris where a massive warship had been moments before. The Vorthok fleet's response was immediate, but confused. Their energy weapons fired, in perfect coordination, sending streams of crackling power toward the Nightborne. But the human ship's adaptive shielding proved more effective than anyone had dared hope. The alien energy bursts struck the shields and were absorbed. It's converted into power that actually made the Nightborne systems stronger. The ship's artificial intelligence. Artemis began working at superhuman speed to analyze every aspect of the alien technology. Information flowed across the bridge displays as the AI processed thousands of sensor readings per second. Within minutes, Artemis had identified critical weaknesses in the Vorthok ship designs that human engineers could exploit. Lieutenant Park watched her sensor displays with growing excitement as she discovered something incredible about the alien fleet. "Captain, they're all connected," she reported, her voice rising with the importance of her discovery. "The Vorthok ships are sharing information through quantum entanglement. They're like a single organism with multiple bodies." The implications hit Kim immediately. The aliens' greatest advantage was also their greatest weakness. Their perfect coordination came from instant communication between all ships. But that same communication network could be turned against them. "Can we disrupt their network?" Kim asked. "Yes, sir," Park replied, her fingers flying over her controls. "If we target their communication nodes, we can blind the entire fleet. They'll lose their coordination and start fighting like individual ships instead of a unified force." The second wave of quantum torpedoes fired from the Nightborne with deadly precision. But this time, they weren't aimed at the ship's hulls. They were targeting the small communication arrays that allowed the Vorthok to share information. Each torpedo found its mark, destroying the quantum entanglement devices that linked the alien vessels together. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Vorthok fleet, which had been moving in perfect formation just moments before, suddenly began to scatter in confusion. Ships that had been coordinating their attacks now fired randomly, some even hitting their own allies by mistake. The hive mind that had made them so dangerous was falling apart. Commander Choi watched the tactical display with professional appreciation as the alien formation collapsed. "They're completely disorganized," he reported, "without their communication network. They're just individual ships trying to figure out what's happening. The Nightborne pressed its advantage, moving through the outer edge of the Vorthok fleet like a shark among confused fish. Each alien ship that came within range was destroyed with surgical precision. The quantum torpedoes and phase cannons worked perfectly, cutting through crystalline holes and disrupting the organic systems that kept the alien vessels alive. For the first time in their existence, the Vorthok were experiencing fear. They had expected to face helpless prey, but instead they had encountered a predator more deadly than anything in their experience. The hunters had become the hunted, and they had no idea how to respond. The Nightborne moved through space like a deadly shadow, striking fast and disappearing before the confused Vorthok could respond. Captain Kim had ordered hit-and-run tactics, using the ship's superior speed and stealth to pick apart the alien fleet piece by piece. Each attack destroyed another crystalline vessel, reducing the overwhelming enemy numbers one ship at a time. But Kim knew that destroying the fleet wasn't enough. The biorefineries on the colony worlds were still operating, still processing any humans who might have survived the initial attacks. He made the difficult decision to investigate the facilities, even though it meant exposing his crew to sights that would haunt them forever. Engineer Han Soo-jin led the scanning team as they focused their sensors on the massive alien structures orbiting the dead colonies. What they found defied every principle of human decency. The biorefineries weren't just processing plants. They were sophisticated facilities, designed to keep humans alive, while slowly harvesting their biological materials. Captain Han called out, her voice shaking as she studied the sensor readings. "I'm detecting human life signs inside those structures. They're still alive in there." The implications were horrifying. The Vorthok hadn't killed the colonists quickly. They'd been keeping them alive for extended harvesting operations. The detailed scans revealed the true horror of the alien operation. Thousands of humans were suspended in crystalline pods, their bodies connected to machines that slowly extracted everything useful while keeping them conscious and aware. The Vorthok had turned human suffering into an industrial process. Designed for maximum efficiency and minimum waste, Han's hands trembled as she transmitted the footage to the bridge. The images showed colonists who had been partially processed, their bodies kept alive through alien technology, while their minds remained trapped in endless agony. Men, women, and children who had been living normal lives just weeks ago were now victims of the most sophisticated torture ever conceived. "These monsters," Han whispered, her professional composure finally breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the evidence of what the Vorthok had done to innocent people. The engineer had seen combat casualties and industrial accidents, but nothing had prepared her for this level of calculated cruelty. The footage reached the bridge and spread throughout the ship within minutes. Every crew member saw the evidence of what humanity was truly fighting against. This wasn't a war between different species competing for resources. This was a battle between civilization and monsters who had turned suffering into science. "Captain." The mission had started as a rescue operation, but now it became something else entirely. The Nightborne would deliver justice for every human who had suffered in those crystalline hells. The ship's weapon systems, as Kim ordered the complete destruction of every Vorthok structure in the system, the quantum torpedoes and phase cannons began targeting not just the enemy ships, but the biorefineries, communication arrays, and support structures that kept the alien operation running. The Vorthok's organic technology began to fail catastrophically. As the human weapons overloaded their bioelectrical systems, their crystalline ships started to crack and burn, brilliant flashes of light marking the death of each alien vessel. What had been a coordinated fleet became a collection of dying organisms. Death throes visible across the entire system. The aliens' perfect coordination dissolved into chaos as their communication networks burned out. Ships that had moved in perfect formation now drifted helplessly, their organic systems failing one by one. The hunters had become the hunted. In all directions, their perfect coordination shattered by the loss of their communication network. What had been an organized fleet became a collection of panicked individuals, each trying to escape the human predator that had appeared from nowhere. But Captain Kim had no intention of letting any of them survive to warn other Vorthok forces. "Every single one of them," Kim ordered, his voice cold with determination. "I want to know where they're going and how fast they're moving." The Nightborne's advanced sensor array began following the quantum signatures of the fleeing alien vessels, creating a three-dimensional map of their escape routes across history. Nightborne moved through space like a ghost, using its stealth technology to approach each fleeing Vorthok ship without being detected. The aliens never knew death was coming until the quantum torpedoes struck their hulls. Turning their crystalline vessels into clouds of glittering debris, Communications Officer Lee continued monitoring alien transmissions. And what he heard revealed the growing terror among the Vorthok survivors. Their calm mechanical discussions had been replaced by something that sounded almost like panic. The aliens were struggling to understand how a single human ship could hunt them so effectively. Lee reported, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. "Their fleet commanders are trying to figure out how we can move through space without being detected. They're saying we appear and disappear like ghosts." The fear in the alien voices was unmistakable. Even through the strange, crystalline tones of their language, the Nightborne's crew worked with deadly efficiency, their movements coordinated and precise. There was no celebration after each kill, no cheering or victory shouts. They simply marked another target destroyed and moved on to the next one. The horrors they had witnessed in the biorefineries had transformed them into instruments of justice, focused only on ensuring no Vorthok escaped. Lieutenant Park tracked the fleeing aliens across vast distances, her sensors following quantum trails that stretched across dozens of light years. "Next target is in the Kepler 438 system," she would report, as the Nightborne would engage its hyperspace drive to continue the hunt. There was no rest, no pause in their pursuit of the creatures that had tortured innocent humans, each destroyed. Vorthok ships sent ripples through the alien communication network that spanned the galaxy. The quantum echoes carried more than just news of their deaths. They carried tactical information about human capabilities, weapon effectiveness, and the terrifying realization that Earth's children were not the helpless prey they had appeared to be. Other alien civilizations began intercepting these transmissions, learning about the systematic destruction of an entire Vorthok fleet by a single human warship, of humanity's unexpected military capabilities. The galaxy was taking notice, and the attention was not what anyone had expected. The Vorthok survivors tried desperately to escape to their home systems. But the Nightborne was always one step ahead. Captain Kim had turned the hunt into a science, predicting where the aliens would go and arriving before them. The crew watched their tactical displays with cold satisfaction as each red dot disappeared from the screen. Within hours, the mighty Vorthok fleet had been reduced to scattered debris, floating in empty space. The aliens who had treated humans as livestock had learned what it meant to be hunted by creatures who understood both mercy and justice, and had chosen justice for the crimes they had witnessed. The ship's artificial intelligence Artemis had been working constantly since the battle began, analyzing every piece of data about Vorthok technology. What it discovered changed everything about how Captain Kim viewed this conflict. The aliens didn't just use communication networks, they were completely dependent on them for everything from navigation to basic survival functions. Captain Artemis announced through the bridge speakers, its synthetic voice carrying an almost human tone of excitement. "I have identified the complete structure of the Vorthok communication network. It spans 47 star systems and connects over 3,000 installations." The scale was enormous. Representing centuries of alien construction and expansion, Kim studied the holographic display that showed the network's structure. It looked like a massive spiderweb stretching across space, with communication nodes serving as connection points between different sectors. Each node was heavily defended and considered vital to Vorthok operations. But Artemis had found something the aliens hadn't considered. Their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. The network uses quantum entanglement to maintain instant communication across vast distances, Artemis continued. However, the system is designed for efficiency, not security. If we can overload key nodes, the feedback will cascade through the entire network. The AI had found a way to turn the aliens' own technology into a weapon against them. Kim saw the opportunity immediately. This wasn't just about winning a single battle. Anymore, this was about sending a message to the entire galaxy about humanity's capabilities. The Nightborne could strike a blow that would be heard across dozens of star systems, announcing that Earth's children were not defenseless prey. Tactical, prepare precision strikes on the primary communication nodes, Kim ordered. Commander Choi began calculating firing solutions for targets that were scattered across multiple systems. The Nightborne would need to use hit-and-run tactics, striking each node before the aliens could respond or adapt their defenses. The first quantum torpedo struck a communication relay in the outer system, and the effect was immediate and devastating. Instead of simply destroying the node, the weapon's energy caused a massive feedback loop that traveled through the quantum entanglement network at the speed of light. The overload spread like fire through dry grass, jumping from node to node, faster than the aliens could react. Direct hit on primary node, Choi reported, his voice filled with professional satisfaction. I'm reading massive energy surges throughout their network. The feedback is cascading exactly as Artemis predicted. The tactical display showed energy. Spikes racing through the alien communication system like lightning through a wire, across multiple star systems. Vorthok installations began to experience catastrophic failures. Communication centers that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly erupted in brilliant explosions as their quantum entanglement devices overloaded. The aliens watched in horror as their most vital infrastructure destroyed itself from within. The Vorthok tried desperately to isolate the damaged sections of their network, cutting connections and shutting down nodes in a frantic attempt to stop the cascade failure. But their efforts only made the situation worse. Each time they severed a connection, the energy had to find new paths through the network. Overloading systems that weren't designed to handle the additional load, their emergency protocols are actually accelerating the collapse, Artemis observed. With something that sounded almost like amusement, they're trying to save their network by isolating damaged sections, but the quantum energy has to go somewhere. They're creating new failure points faster than we can target them. What the Vorthok had spent centuries building was unraveling in hours. Their communication network, which had allowed them to coordinate attacks across dozens of systems, was becoming a weapon of self-destruction. The aliens were learning a painful lesson about the dangers of over-reliance on interconnected systems. The cascade failure continued, spreading through the network, reaching installations that were light years away from the original battle. Vorthok forces throughout the galaxy found themselves cut off from their command structure, isolated and confused as their communication systems burned out one by one. The last Vorthok stronghold in the system was a massive crystalline structure that had been built around one of the smaller planets. It was easily 10 times larger than any of their ships, a fortress that had served as the command center for their entire harvesting operation. As the Nightborne approached, the alien structure began broadcasting on all human communication frequencies. Human. Vessel. The mechanical voice spoke in perfect English. We propose an exchange. We will return all surviving biological units from your species in exchange for safe passage from this system. The cold, clinical way they referred to human prisoners as biological units made Captain Kim's blood boil with rage. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited for their captain's response. Through the viewports, they could see the alien fortress, glowing with bioluminescent patterns, its crystalline walls pulsing with the same rhythm they had seen in the biorefineries. Somewhere inside that structure, human survivors might still be alive, still suffering in those nightmarish processing chambers. Kim activated the ship's communication system, ensuring his response would be broadcast on every frequency the aliens were monitoring. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. You had your chance for mercy when you chose to harvest our people. You made your choice when you turned human beings into industrial resources. Now you'll face the consequences. The Vorthok stronghold immediately began powering up its defensive systems, massive energy weapons emerging from crystalline growths along its surface. But it was too late. Engineer Han had spent hours modifying the Nightborne's quantum torpedoes, fine-tuning them to specifically target the bioelectrical systems that kept Vorthok technology alive. All weapons armed and ready, Commander Choi reported from his tactical station. Modified torpedoes are loaded and targeting the fortress's central power core. The quantum torpedoes would do more than just destroy the structure, they would ensure that every Vorthok system inside was completely eliminated. The Nightborne's final assault was unlike anything the crew had unleashed before. Wave after wave of modified torpedoes struck the alien fortress, each one designed to cause maximum damage to the organic systems that kept the structure functioning. The crystalline walls began to crack and shatter, brilliant flashes of light marking the death of each alien system. The Vorthok tried desperately to call for reinforcements, the transmission towers broadcasting emergency signals across the galaxy. But their calls were met with absolute silence. The communication network that had connected them to thousands of installations across dozens of star systems had been completely severed. They were alone, cut off from any hope of rescue or support. Lieutenant Park watched her sensor displays. As the alien fortress slowly died, the massive structure's energy readings were dropping rapidly, its bioelectrical systems failing one by one. "Captain, I'm reading complete system failures throughout the target," she reported. "No power signatures, no life signs, nothing." The crystalline fortress began to collapse in on itself, its organic support structures no longer able to maintain the enormous weight. What had been a symbol of Vorthok power and efficiency became a monument to their defeat, crumbling into fragments that would drift in space forever. "A system clear, Captain," Park announced as the last energy signature disappeared. From her screens, no alien contacts remaining. All Vorthok installations have been destroyed. The silence that followed was profound, marking the complete elimination of an entire alien presence in human space. The Kepler 442 system, which had been the site of humanity's greatest tragedy, had become the graveyard of their enemies. A single Vorthok vessel or installation remained functional. The aliens who had treated humans as livestock had learned what happened when they underestimated Earth's children. The Nightborne drifted silently through the debris field that had once been a mighty alien fleet. Fragments of crystalline ships caught the light of distant stars, creating a glittering graveyard that stretched across the entire system. Captain Kim stood on the bridge, looking out at the destruction his crew had unleashed. The Vorthok had come to harvest humans like cattle, but they had learned too late that Earth's children were not helpless prey. "Deploy the message beacon," Kim ordered, his voice carrying the weight of history. This moment would define how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. The beacon that Engineer Han had prepared wasn't just a communication device. It was a declaration that would reach every corner of known space. The beacon activated with a brilliant flash of light, its quantum transmitters beginning to broadcast on every frequency used by galactic civilizations. The message was simple but powerful, recorded in Kim's own voice and translated into dozens of alien languages by the ship's universal translator systems. "This is what happens to those who prey upon humanity," the message began, Kim's words carrying across the void with absolute authority. "We are not your victims, or your predators." The species known as the Vorthok attempted to harvest human beings like livestock. They have been eliminated completely. Let this serve as a warning to any other species considering similar actions. But the message was more than just words. Communications Officer Lee had worked for hours to compile complete tactical data from the engagement, creating a detailed record of humanity's military capabilities. The beacon transmitted everything: weapon specifications, tactical maneuvers, and the systematic destruction of an entire alien fleet by a single human warship. The transmission is broadcasting on all quantum frequencies, Lee reported, his fingers dancing across his control panel. It's using the same network pathways the Vorthok used for their communications. The message will reach every major civilization in the galaxy within hours. The quantum transmissions carried more than just information, they carried proof. Video, footage of the battle, sensor readings from destroyed Vorthok ships, and detailed scans of the biorefineries where humans had been processed like industrial materials. Any alien species that received the message would understand exactly what had happened and why. As the beacon continued its broadcast, alien civilizations across the galaxy began receiving reports that defied their understanding of human capabilities. The Vorthok had been considered one of the most advanced species in known space, their technology and tactics proven over centuries of successful expansion. The idea that they could be completely eliminated by a single human vessel was almost impossible to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. The tactical data showed human weapons that could slice through crystalline hulls like paper, defense systems that could adapt to any attack, and strategic thinking that had turned the aliens' greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The galaxy was learning that Earth's children possessed capabilities that no one had suspected. The Nightborne's hyperspace drive engaged with a low hum, and the ship began its journey back to Earth. Captain Kim had accomplished more than just rescuing the surviving colonists he had announced. Humanity's arrival on the galactic stage in a way that would never be forgotten. Across the galaxy, alien councils convened emergency sessions to discuss the implications of the Vorthok's destruction. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly found themselves studying human military capabilities and wondering what other surprises the small blue planet might hold. The war had begun, and humanity had drawn first blood. The message was clear. To every species in the galaxy, Earth's children were not victims waiting to be harvested. They were predators who would hunt down anyone who threatened their people, no matter how far they had to travel or how many enemies they had to destroy.